Alright, hello. It's time for yet another thrilling adventure. This time we're going in the absolute worst area in the series, my comment section. I just finished my ranking series of all the Soulsborne areas and, as expected, many disagreements were had. But I do want to say before we begin, the reception has been overall very positive, so it's not like I'm getting harassed here. Also, I want to say, don't go and try fighting these commenters and ridicule them. That's my job. But really, that's tribalistic and annoying, just don't do that. I will censor people's real names that appear in this video, but I don't care about doing it if it's like Dark Souls fan 123. Like, who gives a shit? You're making a public comment with a made-up nickname. You're gonna be fine. But I will give a content warning here. I'm kind of an asshole. I respect people who are respectful and criticism is fine, but misassumptions of my character and overall rudeness is something I don't like and I'm fine punching right back. Anyway, let's dive in and see what we can find. Mr. Kang Frest. I wanted this one to be the first comment because I love it so much.
Another filtered pleb who can't handle the uncontested Kino that is Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin. Really wacky list you got here. I can think of dozens of way shittier Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro areas that should be here over Demons and 2. And really, Lost Izalith not being the worst area in the entire franchise. Really?
Okay, first of all, I can't stop laughing at the first sentence here. The uncontested Kino that is Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin edition. How can I argue that point? It's the uncontested Kino. And Lost Izalith was like the 5th worst area out of over 100 areas. So it's not like I think it's anything but trash. I guess you just didn't like that I put some of the uncontested Kino areas below it. We have another angry boy here named Jake something. I'm not gonna reveal their last name because that might be something they would regret later on.
Iron Keep is awful. Are you fucking kidding? Dude, you suck at the game if you think alone that's so hard. How are you dying? Bad atmosphere? Literally best area in the game series. You're fucking retarded at dog shit is Souls games.
Okay, not hating Iron Keep is one thing, and thinking that it's the best area in the game is also one thing. But the best area in the series, Iron Keep, really? This is the hill you're dying on. And no, I don't think the Alone Knights are hard. They're pretty easy, it's just that there's so many of them. That's the only slight difficulty about them. They're only difficult if you're trying to get to the boss, and I think I should point this out now. Some of the things I did in the footage aren't how I normally play. I don't normally try to run past the knights to get the Smelter Demon. I don't normally run past the Heights Tower of Flame enemies to fight the dragon. I did these to showcase what happens if you do so. You can often see me purposely fall into traps and such, because this was specifically a footage run, and I tried playing them as if I was new. It was to some areas benefit and others detriment. Now, it doesn't mean I was playing terribly on purpose and then blaming the game for it. I took both perspectives into consideration. First-time experience and learned experience. That's why I was unsure about where to rank Brightstone Cove Zeldora. Because on one hand, the torch making the area 10 times easier is nice to know for repeat plays, but it's also kinda questionable the first time around. So instead of putting that area in bad or awful, which it would be without the torch, I put it in mediocre.
Oh no! I can't run past everything! Bad area! People like you need to be guarded like a pig!
This guy is just an animal. He's wishing me to be killed over a video game opinion. It's just a video game! Jesus Christ! Seems like it's a hobby for him based on his channel content, which is just him calling for violence on other creators. All jokes aside, something is clearly wrong with this person. I hope he gets looked at. And for the many people who think I just hate areas you can't quickly run past, I think you missed the point. The reason I hate Frigid Outskirts, other Dark Souls 2 DLC sub-areas, as well as Iron Keep, Dark Chasm of Old, Lost Izalith, and so on, isn't because they're hard to run past. It's because they waste your time. Having to re-clear the entire Iron Keep if you die to Smelter Demon isn't difficult. It's just an arbitrary waste of time. That's why people hate annoyingly long runbacks. It's not good gameplay. But let's get back to our boy Jake.
How the fuck, dude? I don't even know your pics are just straight up dog shit. Stop boosting. Mogwin's Palace is sick as hell. Best in Elden Ring. It's hard. You just hate hard. Stop playing Souls and stop posting to YouTube.
Okay, so Iron Keep, best area in the series. Mogwin Palace, best in Elden Ring. Better than Leyndell, better than Stormveil. Well, that's certainly a take, one he's very proud of. And this guy, along with many others who don't like what I have to say, really want to focus on destroying the validity of my criticisms by saying I'm just bad at these games and don't like the difficulty. My 5th favorite boss in the series was Malenia. That's by far the hardest boss in the series, in my opinion anyway. I've done that boss on New Game Plus 7, no damage. I've done all of these areas a minimum of like 20 times. I've done Soul Level 1, Blood Level 4 challenge runs and Demon Bell and No Kuro Charm and stuff like that. A hell of a lot. I'm not like amazing at these games, I'm sure anyone could do this if they just had the patience. But I'm willing to learn their hardest bits because they're usually the most engaging for me. I'm not talking about the difficulty here, I'm talking about quality. And there really isn't much to Mohgwyn Palace. It's got a cool vibe and some cool rehashed enemies, so I don't think it's awful, but all of its enemy sections are rather lazy and uninteresting. It's easy to get to the boss, that's not the problem. There's another common theme with the people who dislike the video, and it's that they think I have some kind of bias against Dark Souls 2, and I'm just using this opportunity to shit on it. I said it in the video, and I'll say it again. I like Dark Souls 2. But I do think it's the worst one of the series, yes. Is it bias if I rank subpar areas below better made areas? I do of course have my own preferences and such, and this was not an objective ranking. There's no real quantifiable reason why I think the Depths is better than Shunning Grounds. I just enjoy the Depths more. If you want to see your own opinions ranked, I suggest you make your own video. It's not that hard. This one commenter, Ornstein, says, after seeing the whole series, I have a lot of minor issues, but I think the overarching one is that I think you go way too easy on Dark Souls 3. Like, if you rubbed those areas exactly and put them in Dark Souls 1 or 2, I feel like they wouldn't be ranked nearly as high, and most of my complaints can be summed up to that. I don't hate areas simply for the fact that they're in Dark Souls 2 or something, or like them simply for the fact that they're in Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne. Different games do have different mechanics, so you can't have Dark Souls 3 areas in Dark Souls 2. Can you imagine how awful Ringed City would be with your clunky, sluggish movement? Also, I prefer Dark Souls 1 over Dark Souls 3 by quite a bit, so you definitely can't say I'm biased towards the latter. I think the reason why some of the Dark Souls 3 areas got a high placement was because compared to Dark Souls 1, their enemy designs have improved drastically. Many non-boss enemies in Dark Souls 3 have more moves than your average Dark Souls 1 boss. If you had Lothric Castle in Dark Souls 1, but it only had the basic hollows, yeah, I don't think it would rank too high. Gameplay does matter to me, and Dark Souls 3 does have pretty good gameplay. But honestly, if anything, I was biased against Dark Souls 3 because I don't like the washed out filter the entire game has. Like, Catacombs of Karthus is okay overall, it has some pretty decent enemies, but I just found it so dull looking and bland that I ranked it quite low. And I'm absolutely open to Dark Souls 2 blowing my mind away with its areas. I'm not rooting against it. I absolutely stand by my decision to rank Shulva in the Amazing tier. I have no horse in this race, okay? I don't gain anything by shitting on Dark Souls 2 areas. If anything, it's risky because Dark Souls 2's biggest defenders can be pretty volatile as I've experienced. Such as our next contestant, Gwynblade. This guy is such a menace, Jesus Christ. He's the final boss of the comment section. He left a couple of his own comments and then proceeds to reply to every Dark Souls 2 related comment he can find. And they all have the same running theme, that I'm bad at the games and that the areas are easy, so my complaints are null and void. Again, do I really need to start off my videos by doing like a CV of my achievements in the Souls games before I'm allowed to talk about them? I think if you've beaten the game once, you're allowed to express your opinions about it to the fullest extent. If you had a bad experience, go ahead and share it. If you had a good experience, that's nice, go ahead and share it. But I've played some of these games like Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 about 50 times or more. Sekiro around 20 I'd guess, Elden Ring more than 10, Demon Souls and Dark Souls around 10, Dark Souls 2 around 5. Am I still not allowed to talk about them? What do I have to do to prove myself worthy of having opinions, Gwynblade? What's it gonna take? Again, I'm not trying to brag here, I don't think these make me any more correct than those who've beaten the game just once. I just have a different perspective. Can we not respect that, please? Keeping up with the theme of defending Dark Souls 2, we have the biggest cope I've ever seen. I feel many of your criticisms can be explained away just by understanding the story and themes of the game. The Iron King's fortress is not on top of the windmill. The entire idea behind the game is the curse's effect on the memory. You have no way of knowing how you got to the castle. As for level design and layout, Dark Souls 2 is intentionally designed to be slower and more methodical. You don't want to break the statues that spit poison, that's fine. But then you get upset that you are poisoned when you have the free option to solve that problem. Okay, about Black Gulch statues being destructible, It takes like 20 minutes to break all of them, maybe 10 if you're really fast. And it takes less than a minute to run to the next bonfire right by the boss, and then you can just go and kill the boss. So, who the fuck would ever clear out all the statues? So it's a really short level that's either very quickly over, but extremely annoying in that short span, or it's just a super slow grind of destroying those statues one by one. Either way, Black Gulch does not deserve to be defended. This is a garbage area, there's nothing redeeming about it. Also, this guy's explanation for the Iron Keep transition is that midway through the elevator ride, you get hit by dementia. This is the point of copium we're at. We have to explain rushed development and nonsensical world design by your character having dementia. And if you go back the elevator, you still end up in the windmill. So, is it just this one specific elevator that always induces dementia? And he's not the only one to use this kind of excuse. This is the most magical elevator I've ever seen. It can warp space and time. Look, if you really want to know what happened with the Iron Peak transition, I suggest watching Zuli the Witch's video on it, and her pinned comment sums up the most likely explanation. And it's not dementia or warping of time and space. Now, let's move on to something more positive. Like rape and Auschwitz. A lot of people were unhappy about two specific jokes. One where I likened Harvest Valley to Auschwitz Simulator, and the other where I said that Dark Souls players don't mind getting raped as long as the dick doesn't respawn in their ass the next day. Now, I understand if this isn't your type of humor. My humor can be a little bit on the edgier side sometimes, but they are just jokes, and clearly some people did find them funny. Even this German guy appreciated the Auschwitz joke. I really doubt there's some 150-year-old Auschwitz survivor somewhere watching my Soulspawn area ranking and then getting PTSD from my joke. I don't think it's a big deal, really. I get if you don't like it, you don't need to find it funny. Not every joke is gonna land for every person. You can either ignore it or, watch something else, but I'm not gonna cater to crybabies. Now that the most serious topics are covered, let's just take a step back and discuss stuff people disagreed on. Not in the Gwynblade or Jake Caveman type arguments, but just, like, normal people. I was shocked by how many people actually liked Frigid Outskirts. I don't know where these people came from, but Jesus Christ, guys. Why? Is this the video game equivalent of Stockholm Syndrome? I think the best defense anyone has come up with is that it's kinda meant for co-op, but from what I hear in the comments, not many seem to have had much fun with friends there either. And even with co-op, let's be real, the layout and design of it is just boring. My main issue isn't that it's difficult, I got to the boss first try, it's that it takes too long and the gameplay throughout is repetitive, and the locations are mind-numbingly dull. If you're personally enjoying this fuckhole area with friends, I'm glad to hear it, but I'm also glad you're in the minority. As for the worst excuse people have for Frigid Outskirts, that would be lore. If the developers have made an area that's supposed to be thematically torture and imprisonment, it should feel like torture and imprisonment to play. See, my thing with Frigid Outskirt is that it was meant to be bad. It is known as a place where the king would send exile to be tormented forever and yada yada yada. You get the drill. I just really dislike this lore says it's bad, so it being bad is actually good mentality. No! Awful, unfun gameplay is never excused by lore that you can only find out through obscure item descriptions and assumptions. I'm not gonna go to Frigid Outskirts, have the worst half an hour of my life, then later read the item description of a pair of socks that says, "Yo dude, that Frigid Outskirts place is real bad," and then go, "Whoa, my mind is expanded now. It says so much about the deeper meaning of the game and the themes." No, fuck that! It's fucking terrible! And I've seen this lore excuse everywhere, for multiple things. Like when I said this in the Good Areas video, then it has Misbegottens everywhere, who you've probably seen in just about every corner of the world so far. I think they're fine, especially the Leonine Misbegotten Ultra Chads. It's just that it would have been nice to see this completely unique, fascinating area introduce something equally as interesting in its inhabitants. I do still like it. I think what I said was pretty fair, but no, apparently not, because lore. Enemies in Elphael make sense lore-wise, so that argument is bad. Oh, sure, let's just accept that the lore has declared bad gameplay to have a reason, and then applaud it instead of asking, why didn't you make good gameplay and then lore around that? Why do the Misbegottens have to be there? Why not just make a different race of exiles appear there? Like, come on! Tomb of the Giants isn't supposed to be fun. Tomb of the Giants isn't supposed to be fun. Why do I and most people I imagine play video games? To have fun. So right there it fails. Well said, Agent Tex. I don't think a scary, horrible place needs to have horrid gameplay to make it succeed in its goal. Tower of Latria is a scary place of torture and imprisonment, but that's a fun fucking area, even when you are tense. I love Resident Evil games, Dead Space, Little Nightmares, hell, most appropriately for comparison, Bloodborne. They're awful nightmares, and in the case of Resident Evil Village, that mansion segment was the most terrified I've been in a video game, and it was a brilliant level. Tomb of the Giants is just ass. Now, we've been looking at quite the hot takes from the comments, but I think it's time we address some of my wildest takes. Because, believe it or not, me disliking Frigid Outskirts isn't really an unpopular opinion. However, my extremely harsh ranking of The Gutter seems to be one. I stand by every word I said. I really find it to be like Blighttown and Depraved Chasm minus the atmosphere. In the concept art for Dark Souls 2 it looks brilliant, but for me it utterly failed to translate to the screen, mostly due to rushed development, it seems. Really, I want a Dark Souls 2 remake where the original concepts are fully realized. But fortunately for The Gutter, as it currently stands, it does have its fans. Gutter is way too low in my opinion. I think the progression of figuring out where to go was interesting and I like trying to find all the torches. I do agree with the lighting of torches being kind of a neat way of keeping track of where you've been. It's a tiny little positive in a sea of negatives for me. The other infamous poison swamps, Farron Keep and Swamp of Sorrow, especially Swamp of Sorrow, do have their fans too. Common theme is that the atmosphere is great, which it is. That's why I like Depraved Chasm, it's the same area, minus the bad gameplay. But others seem to enjoy the punishing roll animation, which I think is just a stupid mechanic. I've had times where like my one foot was in the swamp and because of that I was unable to roll. If it really was such a great mechanic, why do you think they never implemented it again? Also, as expected, my placement of Blighttown could not satisfy everyone, or anyone really, because people either love it or hate it. So half the people were saying I ranked it too low at the top of mediocre, and others were upset that it wasn't in part 1. I can't win this one. And of course, my lack of Frozen Ilium Lois appreciation didn't sit well with everyone. Also as expected. And I'm once again going to have to say, I stand by my decision. Once again, has nothing to do with the area being difficult, even though this time it actually is pretty tough. This time it took me around 2 to 3 hours to fully complete the Ivory King DLC, and that's with me knowing where to go and not dying more than a couple times due to impatience. That's way too long of a time to spend in such a bland area, so the forced re-exploration just didn't do it for me, I'm sorry. Another debated placement was in the Good Areas video, where I had Ash Lake and Great Hollow jointly placed as the bottom Great Tier area. This is probably the one placement where I could definitely be convinced to place it elsewhere. I'm surprised Ash Lake is as high as it is. Sure, the area is beautiful and serene, but it is completely empty outside of Hydra and some clams. Also, not being able to warp out if you happen to find it first playthrough is pain to find your way out again. That is a good point with the bonfire. These days I purposely avoid lighting any bonfires past the Great Hollow, so that I can just warp back with a homeward bone. If I die along the way, whatever, I probably got to bask in its glory long enough anyway. But sure, I could see myself placing Ash Lake as either top of decent or bottom of good. It's tricky to say. It's great world building, but mediocre as a level. Surprisingly, not many people were vocal about the Anor Londo placement. It seems people are generally in agreement that it's good, but lacking in grandeur in its level design. As for my top picks, I think regardless of which area I put as number 1, it would attract a lot of disagreements, and Lanedale was no exception. Not everyone loves the openness as much as I do. I like getting lost in this massive city and finding my way out, whereas others prefer more linear levels and don't enjoy the confusion. And that's fair enough. All in all though, it wasn't really a hot take. I think most people love Lanedale. But is it recency bias? Do I just have fond memories of Elden Ring areas because they're new? I don't think that's it. When Sekiro came out, Fountainhead quickly became my favorite area in the series. And Fountainhead is still my second favorite area, only beaten out by Lanedale now. I usually have the reverse bias actually. I ranked Nokron much lower in my original Elden Ring area ranking, but here it is in amazing tier, because I think I'm in the hindsight phase, not first reaction. Our final comment of the day is the crown jewel of my collection. However, this one wasn't in the area ranking, but rather the top 20 bosses in the series. And it's Mr. X.
Well, I actually thought this could be a kinda interesting list, until I saw your Melania placement. I never beat her, but I have to admit this video feels more like mindless contrarianism. Dude, if you really are a cool person, at least try to find one negative to the bosses. Real critics do that. If not, you'll have to cope with the life of a lonely YouTuber with no heart, no friends, and no one that cares about you. Nice talking with you. Have a good day.
Signed, Mr. X.
Melania was unironically my least favorite Elden Ring boss when I first fought her. I thought the life-stealing made progressing the fight really frustrating, and the infamous waterfowl dance was always instant death for me because I couldn't for the life of me figure out a consistent way to avoid it. And all this was before I even knew she had a second health bar. And I know a lot of people had the same unpleasant experience, and I don't think time has fully changed my mind about the poor choices for first-time players.
Alright, well, since I'm so lonely and have no friends, why don't you subscribe and join my Discord server? And thanks for watching and commenting. I do enjoy these discussions most of the time. Peace!